My brothers and sisters, today I wanted to reflect upon a few ayat of the Quran to set the stage for a much deeper discussion. Sometimes you only begin to appreciate an ayah when you place it inside your modern context, inside your own struggles, inside what you see around you. And when both align, the heart opens. When we study the leadership of the Prophet (DFA), one of the most remarkable qualities we see is his ability to regroup his ummah after every moment of fitna, every test, every internal fracture. A dispute would break out. People would fall into weakness or disagreement, and yet he (DFA) would bring everyone back, sit them down and remind them why they were doing this in the first place. This pattern repeats itself throughout the seerah. And to truly feel this, take the example of Uhud. 50 archers on the mountain and 40 came down in disobedience to the Prophet (DFA), assuming the battle had ended. Because of that mistake, the Muslims were exposed from the back and defeat began to unfold. Imagine being one of those 40 returning to the community, carrying the guilt of a mistake that didn't just cost embarrassment or bad PR, but cost over 70 lives. Imagine showing your face to the Prophet (DFA) after that. And then imagine being the wife, the son, the daughter of someone killed because of that mistake, standing in prayer next to the very person whose error cost your family everything. Yet the Prophet (DFA) brought them back together. He reintegrated them without naming or shaming them. To this day, no one knows the names of those 40 archers, because Allah protected their honor and His Messenger (DFA) protected their dignity. They were not hypocrites. They fell into human weakness. The hypocrites were the 300 who walked away before the battle even started. Those who abandoned the Prophet (DFA) intentionally were different from those who slipped accidentally, and the Messenger of Allah (DFA) understood these emotional and spiritual nuances with perfection. This was his leadership, the constant ability to pull a wounded community back into unity without crushing their spirits. And remember, he (DFA) wasn't dealing with simple communities. He was calling a people deeply rooted in tribalism, classism, and rivalries. Idols were not just stones but symbols of identity, pride, and hierarchy. He had to penetrate through layers of tribal psychology while still preserving the purity of the message. He didn't destroy their tribal structures, rather, he (DFA) spoke to the best qualities within each tribe, inviting them to refine their virtues through Islam and leave behind the arrogance and rivalry. But the challenge was real. In Mecca, he faced rejection for one simple reason: you are not from our tribe. That was Abu Jahl's mindset. No matter how truthful or eloquent the Prophet (DFA) was, Abu Jahl refused to accept him simply because he was from Banu Hashim, not Banu Makhzum. Even before the Prophet (DFA) reached Medina, the Jewish tribes of the region knew from their scriptures that the final prophet would arrive there. Many of them settled in that area waiting for him. But when they realized he was not from among them, jealousy overcame truth. Tribal pride overpowered revelation. And when the Prophet (DFA) finally entered Medina, he walked into a society with over 40 sub-tribes whose fathers had slaughtered each other in years of brutal warfare. So he left one fractured society in Mecca only to enter an even more fractured one in Medina. Yet it was these very people who embraced Islam wholeheartedly and rose above their old hatred. Why? Because Allah overwhelmed their hearts with a truth so powerful that everything else, tribe, ego, identity, became secondary. And that is what true unity looks like. As human beings, we all have tribal instincts. Many people today still behave tribally, not ideologically. They cling to whatever group, label, or identity gives them comfort, even if it has nothing to do with truth. But Islam came to elevate us above that, to gather us under one word, one purpose, one covenant. And when the Ummah truly embraces that, the divisions that once dominated our consciousness shrink into nothingness compared to the light of guidance that Allah places in a united heart. And so, my brothers and sisters, if there is anything this entire reminder leads us to, it is this: You were not created to drift through life, pulled by tribes, trends, egos, or emotions. You were created to hold on to something far greater, the rope of Allah, the very rope that saved a divided nation, healed ancient wounds, softened hardened hearts, and turned ordinary people into heroes who carried a message that outlived empires. Today, that rope is extended to you just as clearly as it was extended to them. You are living in a time of chaos, confusion, identity crises, and endless distractions. But Allah is still calling you to something higher. He is still inviting you to rise, to purify yourself, to step away from petty arguments, to walk away from the sins that are eating your soul, and to wake up to a purpose that is bigger than your desires. Because if the early Muslims could drown centuries of hatred in the oceans of faith, then surely we can drown our ego, our grudges, our laziness, our excuses. If they could unite on a cause greater than blood and tribe, then surely we can unite on the Quran and Sunnah. And if a man drowning in addiction could rise to become a warrior the moment purpose touched his heart, then what excuse do we have? Allah has already placed strength inside you, but strength needs urgency. Purpose needs action. Faith needs commitment. So hold on to the rope of Allah with everything you have. Pull others toward it when you can, and never let the world loosen your grip. For the day you decide to live for Allah, every step becomes light. Every struggle becomes worship, and every sacrifice becomes a bridge to Jannah. May Allah make us among those who rise when others fall, unite when others divide, and hold firmly to His rope when others let go. Ameen.